Good morning. I didn't even take the time to see if Dallas was done with his video. I've actually been thinking about um, starting earlier. Watch this. Can I click on things while I'm doing this live stream? Oh, I can. You can only, you can have only one create a new poll. Look at that. I can start a poll. I'm typing, so I can't see you guys. Best start. Oh, it didn't work. Start time. There we go. Next. 7:30. Next. 7 a.m. And then I can do, how do I add another option? Why is there only two options? That's kind of weird. It's only a 2-question poll, huh? Well, let's try that. Okay. Well, you're all watching. Did I just close out of my poll? Look at me. Oh, I messed it all up. Oh, well. I'll figure out a poll thing another day. We got a Bible study to do, and I don't know why I'm getting distracted. But I've thought about starting at 7 or 6:45. Just an earlier start time. I know there's people at work that watch later because of that reason. There's other people who maybe just wake up in time just to watch. So, I mean, it's a catch-22. But that would get me done before Dallas then. Let's see. We're in the book of Exodus, and I don't remember where we left off. Yesterday I was fighting with technical problems, and I finally got tech support, like on the phone with me. They're East Coast, so I started at 6 a.m. and I was still going hard till like 10 or 11, and I got our heat pump working. So let's see. Oh, I think we made it to chapter 13. Let's see here. I think we made it chapter 13, so we're just going to start off chapter 13. So Exodus chapter 13 says, Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Consecrate to me all the firstborn, whatever opens the womb among the children of Israel, both man and beast, it is mine. Now we're going to, I think, take a small break and then get back to that. So just hang in there. Then, verse 3, Moses said to the people, Remember this day in which you went out of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. For by strength of hand the Lord brought you out of this place. No leavened bread shall be eaten on this day, are going out in the month of Aviv, which again will be later turned into the month of Nisan, Passover, the 14th of Nisan. Which again, Aviv, it means like barley, I think. It's the idea, it's like it's the very beginning of the harvest, but they changed it to Nisan, which means the start. So they changed the name of the month. Verse 5, And it shall be when the Lord brings you into the land of the Canaanites, the Hivites, Amorites, Hivites, Jebusites, which he swore to your fathers to give you, a land flowing with milk and honey, that you shall keep this service in this month. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. On the 7th day there shall be a feast to the Lord. Unleavened bread shall be eaten 7 days. No leavened bread shall be seen among you, nor shall leaven be seen among you in all your quarters. You should tell your son in that day, saying, This is done because of what the Lord did for me when I came up from Egypt. It shall be a sign to you on your hand and as a memorial between your eyes, that the Lord's law may be in your mouth. For with a strong hand the Lord has brought you out of Egypt. You should therefore keep this ordinance in its season from year to year. We'll get back to the law of the firstborn. But let's just focus on this, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and at least one major thing that's brought up in this. And so he's just telling you you're gonna go to the land of Canaan. You're gonna enter this place. You're gonna be freed from bondage. And then you're gonna do this thing. And your son is gonna ask you, why do we do this? And it says, you shall tell your son in that day. And for what it's worth, this example is given in a few places in the Torah, in the Old Testament, books of Moses, right? And it talks about when your child shall ask of you. What does this mean? you shall reply. So it's kind of a repeated thing. And if you look at each time it's mentioned, you can kind of get a little more information. But it talks about it being a sign on your hand and as a memorial between your eyes, and that the Lord's law may be in your mouth. Now, we see the Jews today and in the time of Christ with the phylactery, these little boxes that are bound with leather strap to the hand and to the forehead. And Jesus kind of poked fun at the Pharisees, how they would get bigger and bigger boxes, so they're dragging a steamer chest along the ground with their face because of these big boxes, because they, it was more spiritual to have a big phylactery. And the catch is that in the Septuagint, it actually translates in the Shema in Deuteronomy 6, how it should be as frontlets for your eyes. And that's like on a horse, they have those little blinder things that they wear. That's what it's describing. On a horse, that helps the horse look where it's supposed to go and not be distracted by other things. This is all building into one thing, is you see God's law. He's talking about the law, and the Mosaic law didn't even exist yet, right? It wasn't there. But the idea that God has continually be revealing his will to us and clarifying and fine-tuning what his will for us and how we ought to live, right? Understanding the way of God and the will of God, and that God has freed us from the land of bondage. These thoughts and concepts, and we do things like here, they're doing the Feast of Unleavened Bread following the Passover feast. In the middle is the Feast of First Fruits. That'll get brought up later in Leviticus. But the catch is they're doing these things and they're living in such a way that it's bound to their hands. All they do. It's on their forehead as frontlets between their eyes. All they look at. And the eyes are the gateway into the body and into the mind. And so it's really all you think. And again, in their mouth, all they speak. That their whole lives, in fact, let's just flip over, because it is actually one of my favorite little Bible texts, Deuteronomy chapter 6. And I could get easily sidetracked in Deuteronomy 6. You guys got to keep me focused here. Starting in verse 4, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Echad, which it's like one, like it's actually how to describe grapes. It's a cluster, but it's one cluster. So it actually even hints at the deity of the Trinity, and the deity of Christ, part of that, but the Trinity, because it speaks of a oneness, a unifying oneness, not a singleness. There's a different Hebrew word for single. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. These words which I command you today shall be in your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children. That word, teach diligently, is one Hebrew word, and it's the word for sharpening a blade. A continual, repetitive, little by little process. And it takes a lot of time and effort to use a rock to sharpen a sword. Teach them diligently your children. Talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign in your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. And so they've got the little mezuzahs, the little boxes. I don't have a mezuzah on my house right now, but my mom always has given me some, and I would put them up. And they have those scriptures in these little boxes, and they put them on the doorpost of their homes. But for what it's worth, although all of this stuff is primarily just how to live, that God would be always on our mind, always on our lips, always in our eyes, always around our homes, but also that we would teach God's ways diligently to our children, and that they would observe the way we live. And then we can use that as a testimony. This is done because of what the Lord did for me when I came up out of Egypt. You ought to be living a life where your children observe you. And I'll pause there and say, no matter what, your children are observing you. And you ought to live a life when they ask you, why are you the way you are, Mom? And you can tell them with full confidence, I am this way because the Lord got me out of Egypt. I am this way because God has saved me. And now I don't live like I used to live, and I don't live like other people live. God is now on my mind and in my heart, in my mouth, bound to my hands. You see God as you look around this house because he got me out of Egypt. And this whole Unleavened Bread festival, that's the idea, is that after they got out of Egypt, after the Passover lamb is slain, you get the leaven out. Throughout the whole Bible, leaven is a picture of sin. Paul talks about it, purge out the leaven that you might be a new lump. Don't you know a little leaven leavens the... And so children watch these things, but they watch everything. And I'd rather the children see us do it wrong and then publicly confess and repent to them if you've been doing it wrong, because they not only watch the good you do, they watch the bad. And I think we all know this, that if children observe their parents have a casual attitude towards their faith, do you think that the children are going to naturally be stronger than the parent or weaker? Unless, well, ultimately they all have to have their own personal experience. But right, when you have the teacher and the student's always weaker than the teacher. They observe the teacher because they're trying to look up to and learn. And so if we have haphazard attitudes towards God, towards church, when the kids are 5, 7, 9, and they notice that, like, we went to church every now and then, things would come up and we'd skip church, and then the kids start misbehaving as teenagers, and, well, we want to get the kids to come to church, but they're not really interested in church. Well, maybe it's because we've modeled not a great interest in church their whole childhood. And now that we desperately want them to go to church, well, they've already been taught, because what we had been doing has been caught. And so this idea, I want to take you to the promised land, is what Moses says, or God says to Moses, and Moses says to the people, God has a plan and a place he wants to take us. And it's not to die in the wilderness where these people are headed towards. But that process will be continually doing things to remember what God has done for us, and that God should continually be in my mouth, his word and his ways, in my mind, on my eyes, bound to my hands, upon my doorposts, that he would be the center of all I do and surrounding all that I do, and that when my children ask me, why do we do things this way? It's because he got me out of Egypt. That's why we're different. It's easy to explain to your kids why they can't watch certain shows that their friends maybe have watched when they know that you don't watch those shows. It's easy to explain to kids, we're going to go here and do this because this is what I do. And they are brought up watching and learning from their parents how to live. And so, and you shall tell your son in that day, saying, this is done because of what the Lord did for me when I came up from Egypt. It shall be a sign to you on your hand, and as a memorial between your eyes, that the Lord's law may be in your mouth. For with a strong hand the Lord has brought you out of Egypt. So let your life reflect it. Let your kids and your kids' kids see that you are different because the Lord has brought you out of Egypt. Live like you're free. All right. Glad to be back. If you haven't commented, then you get no say. We talked at the beginning of this video. thinking about starting like 7 or 6:45. I'm even leaning towards 6:45 because I even know specific people who have engagements that start at 7. So, I mean, I know Enrique needs his beauty sleep, but the rest of you are already very beautiful and you don't need your sleep. So, think about it. Comment if you got a thought. No, I like later. Earlier would be good. Dallas keeps moving his time around. That guy, he keeps getting closer and closer. I keep telling him, hey man, we're bumping into each other here. We've got co-viewers. All right. God bless you guys. Have a great day. And I will see, what day is it? Tuesday. I'll see some young people tonight. See some of you at prayer tomorrow. God bless you guys.